I came here thinking I would only be a tourist for a few days. Instead, I became someone who returned again and again and again, discovering new beginnings, friendships, wonder, and the kind of moments you don't plan for and can't fake. Without that, this would just be another influencer chasing views. There, I said it. Have you ever heard of a Hutong? Well, that's exactly what we're going to be exploring in this episode. As we make our final stretch of the day, we're stepping away from the main streets and venturing into one of Beijing's most iconic Hutongs. These aren't just narrow alleyways, they've been a central part of life here for centuries, shaping the way the communities live, interact, and grow together. Today, we're going to explore the history, culture, and the everyday life that still exists within these spaces, while also looking at how modern changes across China have gradually transformed them over the years. From the traditional roots of the Hutong communities to the evolving pace of the city around them, this is where past and present meet in a very real way. So come join me as we walk the streets of Wudaoying Hutong, Guozijian Imperial College, and finish with a delicious meal at Bianyifang Restaurant. All of this as we wander China. On our last episode, we walked through the beautiful Beihai Gongyuan, remembering years' past experiences, exploring the historical monuments, temples, lakes, and artistry that holds no bounds. From Beihai Gongyuan, we drove to another hidden cultural spot near the Beijing Lama Temple. This area is well known for Beijing's Hutongs and the prestigious Confucian Imperial College. In order for us to better understand what Hutongs were like when you walk through the streets, we need to go back to a much earlier time, before Beijing even existed in its current form. And what better place to view that than Beijing Capital Museum, Beijing Shoudu Bowuguan. The layout of Beijing doesn't just happen randomly. It comes from a much older model of city planning that was already fully developed during the Tang Dynasty, especially in the capital city of Chang'an. Chang'an was designed as a district grid. Major roads ran north and south, east and west. The city was divided into rectangular blocks called wards. Each ward was enclosed and gated. This system emphasized control, organization, and hierarchy. That same planning philosophy, the idea of a structured, grid-based capital, directly influenced how Beijing would later be built. The real beginning of Beijing's Hutongs comes during the Yuan Dynasty, when the Mongols established their capital, Dadu. Dadu followed a grid layout similar to earlier capitals, but with an important difference. Between the main streets, more narrow lanes were created. These lanes became what we now call Hutongs. The term Hutong is believed to come from a Mongolian word meaning a well, since early residential areas were often organized around shared water sources. So from the beginning, Hutongs were not just pathways, they were residential spaces tied to everyday life. During the Ming Dynasty, Beijing was rebuilt as the imperial capital. This is when the Hutong system became much more extensive. Thousands of Hutongs were laid out across the city, generally running east and west for the Hutongs themselves, north to south for the main avenues. However, not all Hutongs followed the perfect alignment. Some developed as slight angles, what are often called slanting streets. These appeared for several reasons: pre-existing Yuan Dynasty layouts, adjustments to terrain or drainage, construction around important buildings or compounds. So even in a planned city, practical needs created variation. By the Qing Dynasty, Beijing had a very clear spatial structure. In the inner city, Hutongs were more rectangular and grid-like. Many were associated with officials and elite families. In the outer city, the layout was less rigid. Slanting streets were more common. Commercial activity were more active. For example, the Dongse Hutong are known for preserving a more regular grid structure. Hutongs in Chongwen district developed more irregular patterns and stronger commercial presence. This contrast showed how planning and everyday life interacted differently across the city. Hutongs were designed for close community-based living. Within a typical area, you would find small local shops, schools, temples, guild halls where people from the same hometown gathered. Guild halls were especially important for migrants, offering social and economic support. Life in Hutongs was highly interactive. Residents shared courtyard space, daily routines, and social relationships. Because of this, Hutongs became strong social environments, not just residential areas. Over time, many Hutongs became associated with cultural figures, including actors, performers, and writers. Living in Hutongs provided access to community networks, proximity to cultural and commercial centers, spaces for creative activity within courtyard homes. This helped shape Beijing's cultural identity, especially in areas connected to traditional performance and arts. At the center of Hutong life is the Siheyuan, the traditional courtyard residence. A standard Siheyuan consists of 4 buildings arranged around a central courtyard. Each part has a specific function. The main house, which is on the north side, facing south, is for the head of the family. The side houses, which are east and west, are for children or relatives. The south building is often used for servants or storage. The design follows both practical and cultural principles, maximizing sunlight and airflow, reflecting family hierarchy, creating a private, enclosed living space. The size and complexity of a Siheyuan often reflected the family's social status. In more modern periods, some Hutong areas began to show influence from Lilong housing, originally from Shanghai. Lilong housing is more compact and dense compared to traditional Siheyuans. In Beijing, this led to subdivisions of larger courtyards, increased population density, blending of architectural styles. This reflects how Hutongs adapted over time rather than remaining fixed. As we continue walking, we arrived at Wudaoying Hutong. At first glance, it may feel different from some of the older, quieter Hutongs, and that's because it represents a more recent stage in their evolution. Wudaoying Hutong is located just west of the Lama Temple, an important Tibetan Buddhist temple complex. Because of this location, the area historically had a mix of religious activities, local residents, and small service-based businesses. The name Wudaoying itself is believed to relate to a military or an administrative function during the earlier periods, though like many Hutong names, its exact origins reflect layers of history rather than a single moment. In terms of structure, this is still very much a traditional Hutong, a narrow east and west lane, Siheyuan entrances lining both sides, walls that separate private family spaces from the public street. But what's changed is how those spaces are used. Today, many of these former courtyard residences have been adapted into cafés, boutique shops, small restaurants, and creative studios. This presence is often referred to as adaptive reuse, where historical structures are preserved, but their functions evolve. So what makes Wudaoying especially interesting is that it hasn't been fully commercialized in the same way as some other areas. You still see residents going about their daily routines, bicycles passing through narrow lanes, doors opening into private courtyards, and sometimes cars passing through. So it exists in a kind of balance between past and present. If you compare this to the Hutongs we discussed earlier, during the Yuan, Ming, and the Qing dynasties, these spaces were almost entirely residential. Today, places like Wudaoying show how Hutongs are being reinterpreted. Not abandoned, not completely modernized, but adapted to fit a different kind of city life. And as you move through here, you start to notice something. Even with the cafes and shops, the underlying structure hasn't changed. The scale is still human. The streets are still narrow. The rhythm is still slower than the rest of the city, which makes it one of the clearest examples of how Beijing's past is still physically present, not just preserved, but actively used. At the end of this walk, we arrive at Guozijian Street, one of the most academically significant streets in Imperial China. This area was home to the Guozijian, often translated as the Imperial Academy. It wasn't just a school, it was the highest educational institution in the empire. Students here were among the most elite scholars in the country. Many had already passed rigorous levels of the imperial examination system before even arriving. At the center of the academy stands the Beiyong Hall, This is where emperors themselves would occasionally come to lecture. Not frequently, but symbolically. It mattered. It reinforced the idea that knowledge, governance, and moral philosophy all came from the same source. Education wasn't separate from power, it was a part of it. The curriculum here was based primarily on Confucian classics, which involves ethics, governance, social order, and proper conduct. Students weren't just learning facts, they were being shaped into officials. People expected to maintain stability across the empire, and the environment reflects that purpose. If you look around this street, you'll notice a more formal and symmetrical layout, archways and stone stills recording names and achievements, a quieter, more deliberate atmosphere. This wasn't a place for everyday life. It was a place for preparation, discipline, and achievement, and it stands in contrast to the Hutongs we just walked through. Those were built around community and daily living. This was built around knowledge and the future of the state. So when you walk through Beijing's Hutongs, you're not just walking through old streets. You're seeing a city planning system that dates back over 1,000 years, a residential model centered on family and hierarchy, and a living environment that has continuously adapted to change. Hutongs are not just historical artifacts. They are a record of how people lived, organized space, and built communities in Beijing over time. After spending time here on Guozijian Street, it's hard not to notice the contrast. On one side, you have the Hutongs, built on daily life, family, and community. On the other, you have the Imperial Academy, shaped by discipline, knowledge, and preparation for governing an empire. After walking through all of that, the day winds down the same way it has for generations in Beijing, with food. Tonight, we stop at Bianyi Fang. This place has been serving roast duck since the Ming Dynasty, and it's known for a slightly different approach, a closed oven roasting method that gives the duck a deeper, more even flavor. Alright, so the first thing we have here is the main dish. This is Beijing roast duck. As you can see, the skin is a little darker, slightly crisp, but not overly dry. Let's try it with traditional setup. A few slices of duck, scallions, and a bit of sweet bean sauce. Yeah, that's really different. We also ordered a few classic Beijing style dishes to go with it. So we first have our Qianlong Bai Cai. This is the Emperor Qianlong's cabbage. This is a cold Beijing style dish. It's simple on the surface, but very intentional in balance. What's made of is Napa cabbage, sesame paste, vinegar, a bit of sugar, soy sauce or salt, and sometimes garlic or a touch of chili oil. The taste of this was kind of crisp yet light with the spice of the chili oil, but it was very delicious. Next, we have the Yao Guo Xiaren, which is the cashew shrimp. This is a warm, balanced stir fry. It was clean, slightly rich, and very satisfying without being too heavy. It's made up of shrimp, cashews, aromatics like garlic, ginger, and scallions, and a light sauce like salt or a touch of sugar. Sometimes could be made of starch for the gloss. It has a crunchy texture for the fried shrimp and kind of tangy and sweet, but it was really good. Next we had the ganja wanzi, fried croquettes. This was a bold, satisfying northern-style dish. It was crispy on the outside and rich and savory on the inside. Mostly, ganja wanzi is made up of ground pork, ginger and scallions, soy sauce, and salt. Sometimes they add egg and starch to bind and create the texture, and deep fried until they're golden. It was a little on the dry side for me, but it still was enjoyable to eat. Next, we have the Juhua Doufu Tang, chrysanthemum tofu soup. Now this is made of silken tofu, clear refined broth, and sometimes it's paired with a slice of abalone or ham or a mushroom, a small green vegetable also for balance. The broth of this is very light, is clean, and very calming. The tofu strands are incredibly fine, and it almost melts on contact. It's soft and silky. So for me, this was one of my favorites. It was light, smooth to the taste, and very refreshing. I think this was a piece of abalone and not a mushroom, so just to let you know. And lastly, we have the baodu, blanched tripe. Now this is a classic Beijing snack. It's all about texture and speed and a punchy dipping flavor. It's made of fresh beef or lamb tripe, quickly blanched for a couple of seconds, and served immediately with dipping sauce. Now the flavor of this is actually made with a dip. It has rich sesame paste, a little vinegar tang, and sometimes they add garlic or chili oil or fermented tofu to it. The tripe itself is actually kind of mild. The sauce does most of the talking. For me, this dish was the least liked, although it still had a good flavor and taste, but it wasn't really something I was feeling. So, there you go. From the structure of ancient capitals to the quiet rhythm of Hutong life, to a table like this at the end of the day. This is Beijing, not just something that you see, but something that you experience one street at a time. Now hold on, before you go, if you enjoyed exploring this place with me, subscribe so you can join the next journey. You never know where we're going to go to next. And if you plan on going where I've already been and need advice, follow me on my socials right here and connect anytime. Thanks for coming along. I'll see you next time.